Thank you for joining us on the first official episode of The Therapist's Invitation. I'm Trever Shirin.
And I'm Mark Mayfield.
And you probably recognize our voices from another show called Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield.
So it's technically like this is the fourth season of Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield. Yeah. But something's changed.
Yes.
You want to share a little bit about what's changed, Trevor?
Oh, man, a lot in my life. I'm no longer in school and will never go back. You can count on that. Like, if I ever choose to go back, like, bring me back to this episode and remind me that that's a dumb decision.
Okay.
So no Dr. Sharon here.
I'll do that.
And am actively practicing therapy at Mayfield Counseling Centers, which is a big shift because for the past 4 years or so, I've been support staff here at Mayfield Counseling Centers doing content development, marketing, vacuuming, like all the things.
All the things that all of us do, but you were doing it times 10.
It was a lot of work.
Yeah,
and I'm glad to be able to finally be in a position where I'm seeing clients and putting a lot of the things that we talked about in Candid Conversations into actual practice with clients. It's been really fun.
Well, and I think my heart has always been, especially at Mayfield Counseling, when we bring somebody in, that's an intern, we want to grow them into somebody that we would hire as a therapist, right? But even more so, wanted to make that very applicable to this podcast.
Yeah.
And so it just didn't feel right staying with Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield after all the hard work you've put into your career and whatnot. So changing it to the Therapist Invitation, which I like. I think I like that title. You need to give us your feedback on that, but also check out our new logo.
Yes.
Because the new logo is pretty cool.
Well, and I think it would be a disservice just to focus on the change that I've experienced in the past little while and not focus on the change that you've experienced as well, because there's been quite a bit.
Which change are you referring to? The book?
Yeah, the books, plural.
Books.
And just the way that you're expanding who you are as Dr. Mayfield.
Yeah, it's been a journey. As we sit here today, my first edit of my second book is going to the publishers. It's a little bit
sounds terrifying.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Like nerve-wracking, terrifying, very vulnerable. I just spent the last 5.5-6 months writing 55,000 words on something that I'm really passionate about, and it's loneliness. And so we'll see as you follow along with us on these new episodes. We'll let you know when it comes out. But it's it's exciting.
Well, and I think that might be a good tie-in, because when we were discussing the change in our show, we talked about what is at the core of what we want to talk about. Candid Conversations was very much geared towards parents and teaching skills and teaching people how to have conversations. Sure. And we didn't necessarily want that exactly. And you had mentioned relationship.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's important as we are, especially in the midst of, as we record this, the pandemic is not over yet. No. And I think it's a multiplistic pandemic now, both of the actual virus and then kind of the societal freak out and the political freak out and all this kind of stuff. So we're, I think, operating out of multiple pandemic levels.
Yeah.
But I don't know what you're seeing in your clients. I'm seeing still in my clients when I go out and talk in public and that kind of stuff, people are just not connecting. Mm-hmm. From a relational standpoint, there is pervasive loneliness that is kind of invading all aspects of our society. And it's frightening, to be honest. I don't want this to be a downer of a podcast, but I think that's part of the reason we wanted to shift is we wanted to invite people almost into our living room and have conversations that are just that. I think conversations where, the hope would be for the listener to insert themselves into the conversation going, I could relate to that, and I wonder about this, and I wonder about that, and feel like they're here with us.
Yeah. Well, and I think if we were to pull one statement from our 3 seasons as Candid Conversations, the one statement that came out more often than not would be a therapist is a paid friend.
Right.
And so I think that some of the therapist's invitation is to relationship.
Sure.
And that the relationship, the friend relationship between therapist and client is a modeling of what relationships can be.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it's very different because it's not reciprocal. The therapist relationship.
Well, it's reciprocal, but it's not, I think, reciprocally beneficial.
I like that rephrase.
So I think so. It is reciprocal in that when we're in relationship with our clients, it's very genuine.
Yeah,
they get the best of us. They get the truest sense of who we are as therapists.
Yeah,
but it shouldn't be about our benefit.
Right.
As the therapist, it should be about the benefit solely of the client.
Yeah. So in that respect, it's different than your everyday relationship. Hopefully, the relationships that you're engaging in are for the most part reciprocally beneficial. Hopefully.
Yeah.
So I think the title of the therapist's invitation is an invitation into relationship with Mark and I, as well as an invitation to kind of a model for how Mark and I have conversation, the things that we're talking about, the education that both he and I have had, him more than me forever and always, and just being able to discuss. I think Candid Conversations was very teaching.
It was.
And I think that was really, really helpful. And if you appreciated that aspect of Candid Conversations, I'm really, really happy. And you're not going to lose that entirely. But Mark and I kind of felt like, and we'll talk about this next week, that this is an equitable switch. And so part of that is not talking down to somebody else, but inviting into the conversation. And so, we may talk about things that you may not know about already, and we'll hopefully be able to be informative. But the goal of each episode is not to necessarily teach you a skill or something, but to unpack through conversation between two therapists this concept.
Did you just hear yourself?
Two therapists? It felt weird when I said it.
It felt weird.
It's nice.
When I heard it, but it was really cool because we've been excited about that for a long time.
I know. I've been eagerly anticipating to, be able to just, be able to do this thing that I've been so passionate about for so long.
And I think you've come into the best version of yourself because of this. Like, I think you've had a lot of the experience, you've had a lot of the knowledge, for quite some time. And sadly, it's the piece of paper that you get
expensive piece of paper
when you were supposed to walk across the stage that didn't happen for you, because of 2020. That really, I think, brings it all into culmination. And so
that.
I think it's something to be celebrated, like, not to gloss over. So
yeah. Thank you, Mark. I maybe as part of inviting people into this relationship, as I mute my phone, we haven't recorded for a little while, so we're still a little rusty.
Welcome to our living room and the conversation.
But I think
silence your dang phones.
Come on, you're a producer. This guy. One of the things I'd like to do is kind of talk about our relationship. I know we've done this in the past before, but I think especially as we restart, as you and I reconnect in this setting,
sure,
it might be helpful. And for me, I'm so grateful for the role that you've played in my life to be able to call me out into the professional that I'm becoming, and to speak words of encouragement and wisdom into me and my wife, and to welcome me into new projects in a way that is not self-serving and not afraid of setting me up for success. Which I think is oftentimes rare, where we find somebody who's genuinely not afraid of the other person's success.
Well, and it's sad that that's the statement, right? And I think it's always been my desire with you and with others is going, what can I do to make you more successful than me? And I think that's not a selfish statement or a statement that I need like accolades for, but it's more like, that's just kind of how I've always been, and Sarah, my wife, has called that out in just kind of how I engage people. But that's really the greatest joy, right? Is to be able to see somebody go, okay, he's a lot more skilled and talented than I am, and that's the way it should be, know. And that's, I think you're coming into that as a therapist. But I think just as, watching you become a dad, and all those things that have happened in the last couple of months, is really exciting as well. And putting into practice everything that you've been kind of rattling around in your head for the last 3 years. Now you're putting it into practice.
Yeah. It's been an enjoyable process. Well, welcome to the love fest that is the relationship between Mark and I.
You don't throw up or turn off, the episode.
This is, we're going to try to avoid either of us being hosts, but I have a burning question.
Sure.
What are you hoping that you get out of this podcast as we change it up? And what are you hoping that our listeners get out of this podcast as we change it up?
I'm going to answer the question and then put it back on you.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
That's a therapist thing to do, right?
Yes.
Let me answer a question with a question. What do I want to get out of this? I think a lot of it is, I think it's the same thing for me and what I want for the listeners. Is I want this message of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health to be accessible, transferable, and engaging for anyone.
Yeah.
I am so tired, and I will not swear on this show. Maybe I will later. But no, I'm so tired of our society being driven by the expert, the politician, the doctor, the fill in the blank. And I'm not saying that any of those professions are wrong.
Sure.
It becomes wrong when it becomes the only source of information that we seek. And so do we turn on the news to find out what's going on in our backyard, or do we go experience it? Do we do our research before we go in and sit down with a counselor or a doctor about what we think might be ailing us? I want to empower those that are listening to be not only a part of the conversation, but the conversation. And I think that's so important because I'm weary. And I think these last 6 months have just really put an exclamation point on just how weary I am of where our society is at. That we either have to burn down something for somebody to pay attention, or we have to threaten to take our life, or we have to, these extremes. And I'm like, why do we have to be so extreme? Why can't we enter into a conversation and go, and there's gonna be times on this show where you and I don't agree.
Yeah.
And that's good.
It's gonna be really good.
Because we need not to be yes people.
Yeah.
One of the quotes that just really stuck with me as I was reflecting on my book today, as I was doing the final edits before sending it in, the final edits of the rough draft, but there'll be a lot more final edits coming.
Some of the edits.
How about that? Is that we live in such a tribalistic culture of us versus them, you versus me. And what I find when it comes to tribalism is that we give up the right to think, to belong. And I'm like, why does it have to be either or? Why can't we belong to something and still think and still question and still be a part of the conversation? And so I think that's what I hope for me and for our listeners.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, listener, if you haven't noticed already that Mark is the biggest dreamer in the room, I think it's obvious after that. That's huge. I think that for me, if I was to separate my goals from what you just communicated and say something different.
You can't say ditto. Sorry.
Yeah, I can't. I won't say ditto. That's unfair.
You shouldn't say ditto because that doesn't play out how we want this to work.
Right. I think for me, I am really excited just to be able to be in this process with you. I enjoy having these conversations. I enjoy the production side of it. I enjoy being able to put it out there. And for me, it doesn't really make a big difference whether 10 people listen or 10,000 people listen, because I've had conversations with, the 10 that have been really significant, that came out of, hey, I heard you have this conversation on the podcast. I had these questions.
Right.
That to me is really my goal, is for this to spur on more.
Absolutely.
And spur on more for our listeners, spur on more for you and I, hopefully even spur on conversations between us and listeners. There's some things that I have in my mind of how we can invite the voices of our listeners to the show, and hear thoughts and really dive into that invitation portion And so that's kind of my hope. And it doesn't feel as lofty as the systemic goals that you have for the show, but I think that they also are very valuable.
Sure.
Because I think that those conversations that we have with each other, hey, I listened to this podcast where they talked about this thing. Those are where those systemic changes actually start.
Yeah, and it's almost I would love for this. What I'm hearing you say too is this kind of being a ripple effect, where one person hears us have a conversation and they share that with a friend. Hey, did you hear this? Listen to this conversation.
Yeah,
and that gets shared with a friend and a friend, and it becomes that framework for change or disrupting the status quo or whatever that looks like. I think is really cool.
Well, and hey, there's like 25 billion. That's not true. I think it's close to several million new podcasts all the time. It's just there's so many podcasts, so you have so many to choose from. So the first thing I'd like to say on that, so I'm grateful that you've chosen to listen to us for as long as you have. And the other one is we're not opposed to you coming back every once in a while for conversations that feel meaningful for you.
Sure.
We'll try to make our titles as interesting as possible so that they grab your attention. But I hope that you don't feel the stress of if I've missed an episode, I can't come back because I have so much to catch up on.
Right. Well, I think what you'll notice too is that for the next maybe 10, 15 episodes, it's going to be under the Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield title on Apple and Google Play. And each episode will be the therapist invitation, semicolon, and then like what we're talking about that day, with the goal of slowly transitioning you as the listener to, go find us under, the title will change, same RSS feed, but the title will change to the therapist invitation. But what you'll notice really like quickly is that the logo has changed.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah. So as Mark and I were kind of exploring what this new change looks like and how we want to shape things differently going forward, we were thinking about name and logo. And I had built out a logo
like a year ago. Yeah.
For a project that we wanted to do in the community that was very, how do I say this? It was the opposite of what we're able to do in the midst of a pandemic.
Yes.
And so I built out this logo. I was really happy with it just because it's kind of, in my opinion, kind of eye-catching. Some people may think it's a little grotesque, but it communicates that mental health, conversations in therapy and relationships are not just emotional, feely things. It's really an interaction between the mind and the heart. And, mind, brain, heart, emotions, spirit, all of those things that we call it. But it comes down to, we have these two seemingly diametrically opposed aspects of ourselves,
right?
The mind and the heart. And I think that as we talk about relationship and connection, that one of the ways we can do that is by connecting the mind and the heart as well. Because it's so meaningful if I can have a conversation with somebody else and say, this is what I'm feeling, and this is what I'm thinking about how I'm feeling. And this is how that thinking is interacting with how I'm feeling.
Or relating.
Or hey, like, I love Dan Siegel's thing, and I always get it backwards, but I don't think it really matters if I get it backwards, because he says everything psychological is physiological.
Right. Yep.
And I think that holds so much truth of the way our brains are operating affects the way our emotions are operating, and the way that our heart is literally beating can impact like the way we're thinking.
It's a nice little teaser to my book, because I talk about all that.
Oh, I love it.
And the symbiotic interaction of our systems, and how they all play off each other. If one's not healthy, the rest of them aren't going to be healthy.
Yeah.
So and that's why I love the logo so much, is it really just pulls out and I think asks more questions than it answers.
Yeah, hopefully. And hopefully our listeners like it. If not, we're deciding to stick with it. So
you just basically tell them, deal with it. Yeah.
On a completely opposite note, we'd love to hear from our listeners as we go forward. Like I said, we're going to do some more inviting in. Feel free to, we're going to probably keep candid@mayfieldcounseling.com as our email address.
I don't want to confuse people too much.
Because it's easier that way. And you can find us on all of Mayfield's sites, which, as we've talked about before, this show is currently sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, where both Mark and I work. We believe in the mission and vision that we have here. Part of that's because Mark is the one that actually started it, so it's kind of a given, hopefully.
I hope I still believe in that. That'd be a good thing.
And Mayfield Counseling Centers not only helps people in Colorado, especially with teletherapy becoming so accessible right now, but it also tries to resource individuals across the country through this show, through the Monday Minute, and through different worksheets and things that we're able to create out of the minds and hearts of the 30 counselors that we have here or something like that.
Lost track.
Yeah, it's enough.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so. With that, those that are listening that are not in state, no, we cannot be your therapist, unfortunately. Now, on a national and local level, myself and some others are working on trying to get that changed so that we can do cross-state line counseling, but we can't right now. So if you're in Colorado, but not in Colorado Springs, you can give us a call, and we can be your therapist. But if you're
may be able to be your therapist.
Well, yes. We shouldn't say we can be.
We need to talk about
and,
it.
When I say we, it couldn't be Trevor or I.
Right.
But it could be somebody on our staff.
Yep.
But goodness of fit. But if you're out of state and you need help finding a therapist, that's when you can reach out to Trevor and I, and we could help out with that.
Yeah. Because our hearts, in the midst of all of our goals for this show, I think that our hearts give a resounding, we are here for you. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to activate change and growth and health in our world and touch individuals on a personal level. Right. To be able to grow and be healthy and encouraged to be themselves as they are and to move forward. I'm a big Mr. Rogers fan, so it comes out of me a lot of just like, the way you are is good enough right now, and that's okay to be the way that you are. Like, it's okay.
Well, and we want to invite you into this journey of conversation. I wish you could come to our living room and sit with us, and drink some coffee and feel the warmth that is what we've designed it to be. But hopefully this will translate into your car speakers or wherever you're listening. And we just invite you. Like, there's nothing you have to bring to the table except just come.
Yeah. Come as you are.
Yep.
Because that's good enough.
It is.
Yeah. And we will continue to do the same on our side.
Yes.
Coming as we are. That's kind of one of the focuses for this change is we wanted it to be more conversational, more just us being able to be us and not have to, not that we were performing for Candid. I think there were probably moments that we were, but as a whole, I don't think we were performing.
No.
But I think that just being able to relax. And it's interesting that we're talking about being more candid in the show that precedes Candid Conversations.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, there might be some days where we're having a bad day, and you're going to get it.
Yep, you're going to hear it.
Experience it with us.
Because that's real.
It's real.
I mean, Mark and I are not perfect we're not perfect human beings.
Not even close.
We complain just like everybody else.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's funny, and maybe I'll end with this, but there are times when I'm having a bad day, and my wife will sarcastically throw out, "Well, didn't you go to school for that?" In her most dry sense of humor and sarcasm.
That's low.
And I'll sit there and go, "Yeah, thanks."
That's so low.
Appreciate it. And then it pulls me out of whatever I'm in, and we just start laughing. But it's real.
It is real. I mean, we're two human beings.
Yep. We
can't escape that, no matter how hard we try.
Well, the greatest compliment that you could give us is if you share this with somebody else. And we're excited to begin this new journey with you all.